Middle Eastern prince demanded Maid's daughter play violin at his wedding. Her performance silenced 2,000 guests. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, edged in gold leaf, delivered by a palace courier who looked at their modest apartment with barely concealed disdain. Fatima al-Mansuri opened it with trembling hands while her daughter Layla watched from the doorway, still wearing her school uniform. You are required to provide violin entertainment at the wedding of His Royal Highness Prince Tariq bin Abdullah. The performance will take place during the ceremony procession before 2,000 distinguished guests. Rehearsal attendance mandatory. Failure to appear will result in immediate termination of household employment. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Fatima's face went pale. No, absolutely not. I'll refuse. Mama, we can't afford for you to lose this job. Layla took the invitation, reading it again. Her stomach twisted into knots. He knows, doesn't he? Someone told him I play. This is cruelty, Habibti. Prince Tariq wants to humiliate you in front of the entire kingdom. Fatima's voice shook with rage and fear. You'll be a servant performing for her betters, a spectacle to demonstrate his power. Layla looked at the violin case in the corner of their small living room, the last possession of value they owned. The instrument had belonged to her father, Commander Rashid al-Mansuri, a military attaché who died defending the royal family from an assassination attempt 7 years ago. The same royal family that had forgotten his sacrifice the moment he was buried. Then I'll give him a spectacle, Layla said quietly, her fingers unconsciously reaching for the delicate scar on her left hand. A permanent reminder of the day her father had taught her to hold a bow properly. But not the one he's expecting. 10-year-old Layla sat in her father's study, the violin resting awkwardly under her small chin. Her bow scraped across the strings, producing a sound that made both of them wince. It sounds like dying cats, Baba, she complained. Commander Rashid laughed, adjusting her elbow position. All beginners sound like dying cats. The difference is whether you give up or push through. Why do I have to learn this anyway? None of my friends play instruments. Her father grew serious, kneeling to her eye level. Layla, do you know why I chose the violin for you? She shook her head. Because the violin is the most human of all instruments. It requires your whole body, your mind, your heart, your soul. You can hide nothing when you play. Every emotion, every thought, every fear and hope becomes sound. He placed his hand over hers on the bow. In my work, I negotiate with people who lie with words. But music is the one language that cannot lie. I still don't understand. One day you will. He guided her bow across the strings, this time producing a clear singing note. The violin was your grandmother's. She played in the Baghdad Symphony Orchestra before the war destroyed everything. When she fled, she carried only this instrument and me. She told me that as long as we had music, we could never be truly poor. Layla looked at the violin with new eyes. What happened to her? She died when I was young, but every time I hear violin music, I hear her voice. He smiled sadly. I want you to have that connection, so that no matter what happens, no matter how difficult life becomes, you'll have something they can never take from you. Who's they, Baba? Anyone who tries to make you forget your worth. For the next 7 years, Rashid taught Layla everything: classical technique, traditional Arabic music, the passionate melodies of Iraqi maqam, the intricate ornamentations of Persian dastgah, the haunting beauty of Andalusian music. He pushed her relentlessly, demanding precision while encouraging emotional depth. Technical perfection without soul is mathematics, he'd say. Soul without technique is chaos. Master both, and you master the voice of the human heart. On her 17th birthday, Rashid gave her his mother's violin, a French-made instrument from the 1920s, its wood darkened with age and history. You're ready now. This is no longer mine to keep. 3 weeks later, he died stopping an assassin's bullet meant for Prince Tariq's father, the Sultan. The royal family sent condolences and a modest death benefit. Then silence. Within 6 months, Fatima had exhausted their savings. Her husband's military pension was delayed indefinitely by bureaucracy. They lost their apartment, their car, everything except the violin, which Layla refused to sell even when hunger made them desperate. Fatima took work as a palace maid, a bitter irony, cleaning the floors of the family her husband had died protecting. And Layla, unable to afford music school despite her talent, practiced alone in their tiny apartment, playing for walls and memories, until now, until Prince Tariq decided to make her his wedding entertainment. The palace's grand ballroom was a cathedral of marble and gold, its vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of ancient glory. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. The wedding planners, a team of European designers flown in at enormous expense, directed workers arranging thousands of white roses and orchids. Prince Tariq sat on a throne-like chair at the center of the chaos, watching with the bored expression of someone for whom excess was ordinary. At 28, he was handsome in the way money makes men handsome. Personal trainers, tailored clothing, the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. Beside him, his bride-to-be, Princess Yasmin of Qatar, reviewed seating charts with barely concealed displeasure. Their marriage was political, arranged to strengthen trade alliances. Everyone knew it. Neither bothered pretending otherwise. "Where is the entertainment?" Tariq asked his wedding coordinator. "The violinist, Your Highness? She's arrived. Shall I bring her in?" "By all means." Layla entered carrying her violin case, wearing her most presentable outfit, a simple black dress her mother had borrowed from a friend. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked exactly like what she was, a servant's daughter dressed for work. The wedding coordinator, a French woman named Madame Dubois, looked her up and down with obvious displeasure. "This is what you're wearing?" "I was told to bring my violin. No one mentioned a costume." "Your performance attire should reflect the dignity of a royal wedding. This is," she gestured vaguely, "inadequate." "Then perhaps I shouldn't perform." Layla turned to leave. "Stop!" Prince Tariq's voice cut across the room. He stood, walking toward her with predatory grace. "You're Fatima's daughter, the commander's girl." "Yes, Your Highness. I remember you, smaller then, always hiding behind your mother during palace functions." He circled her slowly, examining her like livestock. "My security chief mentioned you play violin. Said he heard you practicing in the servants' quarters. Quite good, apparently." "I practice when I can, Your Highness." "How convenient. I needed last-minute entertainment. The string quartet I hired canceled, and here you are, already on the premises." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Play something now. Let's hear if you're worth the space you'll occupy." Layla's jaw tightened. This was the humiliation her mother had predicted. Play well, and she'd be his servant musician, a curiosity. Play poorly, and her mother would be fired. She opened her case and lifted her grandmother's violin. The wood caught the light, gleaming with decades of oil from practiced hands. She didn't bother with tuning. The instrument was always ready. "What would your Highness like to hear?" "Surprise me." Layla positioned the violin, closed her eyes briefly, and began. She chose Massenet's Méditation from Thais, one of the most technically demanding and emotionally devastating pieces in the violin repertoire. The opening notes floated through the ballroom like smoke, ethereal and haunting. Her bow moved with liquid grace, drawing phrases that seemed to breathe. The wedding planners stopped working. Madame Dubois' mouth fell open. Even Princess Yasmin looked up from her charts. But Layla wasn't playing for them. She was playing for her father, for every midnight practice session when despair made her want to quit, for her grandmother who'd fled war carrying only this violin, for every person who'd looked at her cleaning uniform and assumed she was nothing. The music swelled, building to the piece's transcendent climax, a moment where technique and emotion fused into something beyond either. The ballroom's acoustics amplified every nuance, every trembling vibrato, every perfect intonation. When she drew the final note, long, sustained, fading like mist, the silence that followed was absolute. Madame Dubois wiped tears from her eyes. "Mon Dieu," she whispered, "where did you study?" "I didn't," Layla replied. "My father taught me." Prince Tariq stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes, surprise, perhaps even respect. Then his mask returned. "Acceptable," he said coolly. "You'll perform during the processional. Same piece. Don't embarrass me." As Layla packed her violin, Madame Dubois approached. "That was not acceptable, mademoiselle. That was extraordinary. Have you considered a professional career? On a maid's daughter's salary?" Layla couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "I can barely afford strings." The coordinator wrote something on her business card. "Call me after the wedding. I know people, directors of conservatories, orchestra managers. That talent should not be wasted." Layla took the card mechanically, not quite believing it. As she left, she heard Princess Yasmin say to Tariq, "Why is someone that gifted cleaning floors?" His response was cold. "Because talent without connections is meaningless. She should be grateful we're letting her perform at all." The palace grounds transformed into something from Arabian Nights. 10,000 flowers, ice sculptures depicting falcons and horses, fireplaces burning out in frankincense, 2,000 guests in their finest, sheikhs, ambassadors, oil magnates, European aristocrats, celebrities from Dubai to Los Angeles. The ceremony would take place in the palace's historic courtyard, beneath a sky that Dubai's wealth had somehow convinced to stay clear and starlit. Television cameras were positioned discreetly. This was the society event of the decade. In the servants' preparation room, Layla dressed in the outfit the palace had provided, a formal black dress with modest sleeves, elegant but clearly marking her as staff, not guest. Her mother helped adjust the hem, hands shaking. "You don't have to do this," Fatima whispered. "We can leave, find work elsewhere. I won't let them use you." "Mama." Layla took her mother's hands. "Baba died protecting them. For 7 years, they've ignored us. Tonight, they're going to remember exactly who Commander Rashid al-Mansouri was. And they're going to remember his daughter." "How?" by giving them something they can never forget. At precisely 8:12 p.m., as the sun set in spectacular gold and crimson, the ceremony began. Guests took their seats in the courtyard, arranged in concentric circles around a central aisle carpeted in white silk. Prince Tariq stood at the altar in traditional white thobe embroidered with gold thread, flanked by his groomsmen. The Sultan sat in the front row, regal and stern. The national anthem played. Prayers were recited. Then Madame Dubois' voice echoed through the courtyard. Distinguished guests, the bride's processional will be accompanied by Miss Layla Al-Mansouri. Layla walked to her position at the side of the aisle, violin in hand. 2,000 pairs of eyes fixed on her with curiosity and, in some cases, amusement. The maid's daughter. How quaint, how democratic of the prince. She raised the violin to her chin, positioned her bow, and as Princess Yasmin began her procession from the palace doors, Layla began to play. But not Massenet's Meditation. She played something else entirely. The opening notes were soft, almost tentative, a traditional Iraqi melody her grandmother had taught her father and he'd taught her, a song of loss, of exile, of everything beautiful that war destroys and memory preserves. The guests shifted, confused. This wasn't what they expected for a wedding. Then Layla shifted, flowing seamlessly into a classical Arabic maqam, her bow dancing across strings with the intricate ornamentation of ancient tradition. The melody wept and soared, speaking of desert winds and mothers waiting for sons who never came home. Princess Yasmin stopped walking, transfixed. Layla's fingers flew across the fingerboard with impossible speed, producing passages that seemed to require 3 hands instead of 2. She transitioned into a Persian classical piece, Morga Sahar, the Bird of Dawn, a song about hope imprisoned by circumstance. Tears streamed down faces throughout the crowd, women wearing $100,000 gowns, men who commanded oil empires, all of them suddenly confronted with something money couldn't buy, genuine emotional truth. Then, without warning, Layla pivoted into Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons, playing it with ferocious intensity that made the piece feel less like music and more like controlled rage. The violin became a weapon, each note a challenge. You think I'm decoration? You think I'm a servant to be commanded? Listen to what your servant can do. The Sultan himself leaned forward, his expression transforming from bored duty to genuine astonishment. And finally, as Princess Yasmin reached the altar, Layla returned to the beginning, the Iraqi melody her grandmother had carried from a destroyed homeland, but this time she played it differently, no longer sorrowful, but defiant, triumphant, a declaration that beauty survives everything that tries to destroy it. The final note hung in the desert air for 3 eternal seconds, then silence. Complete, total, breathtaking silence. 2,000 guests sat frozen, many with tears on their cheeks, all of them stunned by what they'd just witnessed. Prince Tariq stared at Layla with an expression that transcended shock. This wasn't the polite background music he'd ordered. This was a performance that had just stolen his own wedding. Princess Yasmin was the first to break the silence. She turned to face Layla, and to the shock of everyone present, the bride began to applaud. Slowly, hesitantly, others joined. Then more. Within seconds, the entire courtyard erupted in a standing ovation that drowned out protocol and propriety. Layla stood there, violin at her side, tears streaming down her face, not from joy, but from the release of 7 years of grief, rage, and invisible worth finally seen. The wedding ceremony resumed, but no one could focus. Guests whispered frantically, pulling out phones to identify the mysterious violinist. By the time the vows were exchanged, Maid's violinist was trending across social media. During the reception, Layla was stopped every few steps by guests wanting to know who she was, where she'd trained, why they'd never heard of her. Madame Dubois materialized with 3 orchestra directors, all insisting she audition immediately. But the most unexpected visitor found her in a quiet corridor, trying to escape the attention. The Sultan himself, accompanied only by a single bodyguard. "Miss Al-Mansouri," he said, his voice grave. "A word." Layla's heart stopped. This was it. She'd overstepped. Her mother would be fired. "Your father," the Sultan continued, "was Commander Rashid Al-Mansouri." "Yes, Your Majesty." "He died protecting my family." "Yes, Your Majesty." The Sultan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I did not know his daughter possessed such gift. I did not know his widow worked as a maid in my palace. This is my failure." Layla said nothing, not trusting her voice. "Your performance tonight reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that beneath every uniform, every title, every station, there are lives of extraordinary depth. Your father reminded me of that when he worked for me. Tonight, you reminded me again." He looked at her directly. "What do you want, Miss Al-Mansouri?" "Want, Your Majesty?" "From life, from your music. What do you want?" The question hung between them like an invitation to honesty. "I want to play," Layla said finally, "not as entertainment, not as decoration, but as an artist. I want people to hear what my grandmother heard in Iraq before the war, what my father heard when he taught me, what my mother hears when she remembers who we used to be." The Sultan nodded. "Then you shall. Full scholarship to the Paris Conservatory. Your mother will be appointed as the palace's cultural liaison, a position I'm creating tonight. And your father's death benefit, which was criminally delayed, will be paid in full with 7 years of interest." Layla's knees nearly buckled. "Your Majesty, This is not charity. This is the minimum I owe Commander Al-Mansouri's family. He gave everything for us. We gave you nothing in return." The Sultan's voice hardened. "That ends now." As he walked away, Prince Tariq appeared, looking chastened. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "Yes," Layla replied. "You did." "I wanted entertainment. You gave us truth instead." He paused. "Your father would be proud." "I know," Layla said, "because I played for him, not for you." The prince nodded slowly, understanding the rebuke. "I deserve that." As he returned to his reception, Layla found her mother in the servants' corridor, sobbing with joy and disbelief over news that had already reached her. They held each other as years of struggle, grief, and invisible suffering finally transformed into something else: recognition, justice, hope. The Paris Philharmonic Orchestra stood as the conductor introduced their guest soloist, Mademoiselle Layla Al-Mansouri, performing her original composition, Elegy for Commander Rashid. Layla walked onto the stage at the Philharmonie de Paris, wearing a gown of deep blue, her grandmother's violin cradled in her arms. The audience of 3,000 fell silent. She'd spent 5 years at the Paris Conservatory, studying with masters, performing across Europe. But tonight was special. Tonight's performance would be broadcast live across the Middle East. As the orchestra began the accompaniment she'd written, Layla closed her eyes and played the story of her life. of a commander who taught his daughter that music could never lie, of a grandmother who fled war carrying only beauty, of a mother who cleaned floors so her child could dream, and of a night when a prince tried to use her as entertainment, but instead received an education. The piece ended with the same Iraqi melody she'd played at that wedding 5 years ago, but this time it wasn't sorrowful or defiant. It was peaceful, complete. When the final note faded, the ovation lasted 7 minutes. Backstage, her mother waited with the violin case. "Your father would have loved this," Fatima said. "I know, Mama. I felt him beside me." From a private box, the Sultan watched, having flown to Paris specifically for this concert. Beside him sat an older Prince Tariq, now humbler and wiser, who'd learned that true power isn't displayed through command, but recognized through respect. That night, as Layla walked through Paris streets, still humming with the music she'd created, she whispered to the violin in its case, "We made it, Baba. Grandmother, we carried the beauty forward, just like you taught me." And somewhere in the space between memory and stars, between Baghdad and Paris, between grief and triumph, a father's pride echoed back, "That's my girl. You made them listen. You made them remember, because sometimes the greatest performances aren't about perfection. They're about refusing to let anyone else define your worth, about turning command into choice, and about proving that the most powerful sound in any room is a voice that won't be silenced, even if that voice speaks through strings and wood and a bow held steady by hands that remember exactly where they came from.